this is the year that Windows laptops finally stopped sucking, because we saw some good devices from Intel, we saw some really nice devices from Qualcomm, but we were all waiting to see what AMD would bring with their new tech. So we finally have an all-new chip from AMD inside an all-new laptop from Asus, the ZenBook S16. Now the naming around this chip is god-awful per usual. They went with the AMD RYZEN AI 9 HX 370. It's a terrible name, but there's two chips, the 370 at the top end and then the base model, the 365. And both these chips have great performance, particularly the 370, and they're also very energy efficient. Now, some thoughts about the design of the ZenBook S16. This is a very thin device. It measures in at 12 to 13 millimeters thick, depending on where you throw the caliper. But typically when you have a design that is so thin for an x86 laptop, you just get bad performance. But because of this new chip, they've enabled, you can do it on this device quite well, just to keep it super thin. And also, despite it being super thin, you still have two USB-C, a HDMI, as well as the USB-A and full-size SD on the right side. So it's just like, I think they've done a good job in terms of the kind of overall package and also the top. So this is they call it a ceraluminum finish. It's a terrible name, typical Asus, but it is a ceramic polymer that is bonded to the top aluminum layer. And it's like, it's supposed to make it the surface a little bit harder. It almost feels like polished concrete or polished stone. Also, it comes in two colors. There's a dark gray, which I think looks nice if you don't like this cream color, because this thing looks sick, dude. I love it. And then the third thing in terms of the design that's interesting to me is this series of holes for the grill. So this grill is machined out with these small holes, and then inside those holes are the even tinier holes, and you just get a very unique looking design. Now, I would imagine that if you just CNC'd this stuff out with larger holes, it would be cheaper to produce because there's like less machining time, and I imagine you would just get better airflow with bigger holes. But this is a very unique look. And also, I've been told that if you spill liquids on this, because the holes are so small, it's slightly more spill resistant than if you just went with those large holes. But it's a unique look. Now the screen, this is a sweet screen. So this is rocking a 16-inch OLED panel. Both of these have the 16-inch OLED panel, and I mean, they just look so good. So it's a very nice screen in terms of the image quality because it's an OLED panel, and it's also a very fast screen. 120 Hz refresh rate with a response time that's well under a millisecond, and the colors are on point, and it's a touchscreen, so there's pen support. I think some configurations include a pen in the box, the base ones don't, but this is an awesome screen. In regards to performance, I tested out both the 365 chip as well as the HX 370 chip. And on both these devices, the default power setting is at 17 watts. And if you bump it up to the highest performance mode, it's at 28 watts on both of them. Now this chip that's inside these things, they're able to go up to 54 watts. Obviously you need a thicker device to pull it off, but in some devices, I'm sure some companies will ramp it up to that power setting. But the thing is, even at this lower or reduced power, you're getting really good performance. These are really energy efficient chips. And because it's such an energy efficient device, the heat output is not a lot and the fan noise is very quiet. And it's the main reason why they're able to keep this device super thin. And when they first showed this device to me last May, like a few months ago, I didn't believe that they'd be able to do it. I remember looking at the device and I'm like, okay, it's AMD's new chip. I felt like it was going to be too thin. I looked at the device back then, I was like, there's no way. Like, how can you keep a device this thin and get like the expected performance that the world is used to when it comes to an AMD Ryzen chip? But it's here and it's good. And if you take a look inside, there's a super thin vapor chamber on top of the chip, as well as some graphite sheets, and there's also a pair of fans, and you just get really solid thermal performance for a device so thin, even in games. Now, there's two different GPUs depending on the chip that you get. On the base chip, the 365, you get a Radeon 880M, and then on the higher tier chip, you get the 890M. This just has more compute units than the base model, and these are a noticeable step up from the previous generation of AMD's onboard GPU, the 780M. Now, if you're playing light titles, these are awesome. If you're playing like moderately demanding games,
It's an okay GPU, but keep in mind, this is an onboard GPU running at relatively low wattage on super thin devices. So I'm impressed in terms of what they're able to pull off, but if you want like crazy good gaming performance, these won't give it to you. You still have to get discrete GPUs from NVIDIA or AMD. Now, in terms of video editing performance, if you're curious, like I was, the HX370 with its higher core count is actually surprisingly good at it. Again, it's a super thin system, so if you want something that's like very portable, this will do the job better than you might expect. Now, despite its good performance, there is one thing that I would say is a thermal kind of limitation on this device. The keyboard gets warm when you're using it. It doesn't get uncomfortably hot, but it is something that I noticed pretty early on in my testing, is like if you're playing games or something, or if you're doing a video edit on either of these machines, I just don't think this device was thick enough to get the heat off of the keyboard as well. They have a graphite sheet that helps, but it's designed right now perfectly in terms of like sustaining performance so it doesn't throttle aggressively, but it's a warm keyboard. And I do think that if they made it a little bit thicker, they could have solved that. Now the keyboard itself, it's backlit nicely. Like I'll just show you real quick. It is a very bright backlight, which I like seeing. It's a very fast keyboard to type on. I'm very comfortable on it, but it doesn't feel as responsive as I would hope. And I think that the key travel is a little bit shallow. And I think, again, it's just a super thin device, and this is just what they had to do. If I'm being honest, I wish they had made this device like 1 or 2 millimeters thicker. I think it wouldn't have changed the kind of form factor. It's still been a very thin device, but I think it's just that extra millimeter or two, they would have been able to have a more responsive feeling keyboard. And I think they would have fixed the warm keyboard thing that I'm talking about. The trackpad is nice and big, and it's centered in the middle of the device because there's no number pad on the side. But there's a feature on the device that allows you to kind of slide up and down on the edge of the devices to control things like brightness, if you go on the right, as well as volume on the left. But these are both just, I feel like they're just underbaked because I don't get a responsive feel out of them. I'd rather just hit the buttons and just be accurate on my brightness and volume control. Here, I'm just like, sometimes it works, and then sometimes I'm just like moving the cursor. I think a software update would fix it, but it's just something I noticed. The speakers, very good. I think Asus has just figured out how to do good speakers on laptops. Like, so the G14 and G16, their gaming devices also had killer speakers, and same idea here, just way better sounding than basically the rest of the laptop industry right now. So they got that going. I would actually say that the S16 sounds better than at least the 15-inch MacBook Air, if you're just directly comparing kind of thin and light devices. But these don't sound as good as the 16-inch MacBook Pro speakers. The battery takes up a big portion of the internal space, and this is a 78 watt-hour battery. Now, over the past couple of years, AMD chips were the best choice when it came to just having long battery life Windows laptops. And it's just even better now because this generation of chip is just super energy efficient. So you'll notice the biggest gains when you're just doing light tasks. So if you're browsing the web or checking email or just doing stuff that isn't particularly intensive on the chip, it's going to last a very long time on the ZenBook. Now, something I just thought I would mention, if you noticed I had some gaming laptops on that chart, it's because I'm trying to match battery size. Like, this is a particular battery size. I try to match the battery size when I do comparisons, and sometimes I'll have to dig into the pile of gaming laptops. I've obviously disabled the GPUs to do it, but that's just how I do my testing. I've always done it with battery size matching. Okay, one last thing, I'll bring it up real quick, is the topic of AI, because a lot of the marketing around this chip is about the NPU components going up to 50 tops. But we have yet to see some kind of killer app or killer feature from Microsoft which utilizes that NPU that makes me go, okay, everyone should be going and getting laptops with NPU capabilities. The other thing that I thought was strange is that this device, despite it having 50 tops NPU, is not a Copilot Plus laptop. Like, only the Snapdragon X Elite devices are. Maybe this comes in time, but it's seemingly just a regular laptop to Microsoft at this point in time. Okay, so overall, very good device. I want to talk about the price. $1399. It is expensive. It is priced definitely as a premium product, and $1399 is the base model. The HX370 equipped one with more RAM and stuff is, I think it's like $200 or $300 more. Now, when it comes to a product like this, I'm not going to be the guy that's be like, you should buy this or you shouldn't buy this. Like, what you buy is entirely up to you, depends on your budget. Okay, but I think that because this thing is so thin, and because right now there's nothing else on the market that has this kind of performance with an x86 chip that can do what this thing can do, so I think it's just priced like that because they know they have something fairly unique. And because it's kind of like a premium finish and premium aesthetics, they can do that. I think that that's what you get when you come to market with something fresh like this. But I do think that if you're on the market for something that's super thin like this, this will not disappoint. This actually delivers way more than I thought it would. It's quite impressive. But I think if you're on a tighter budget, you just wait a little bit. There's going to be other devices out there that won't be as nice, but they'll be cheaper. Okay, so there you have it. That's the ZenBook S16 with the new chips from AMD.